Good morning, everybody. How are we on this hump day Wednesday? Oh, I've had a morning of it, I have. The internet wouldn't work. Literally, could not get the internet to connect to my phone, couldn't get it to connect to my laptop. But bizarrely, the internet was connected to my Fire Stick. So I don't know what's going on there. And so I've had to use the Wi-Fi from my iPad. And bizarrely, that's connected to my phone and my laptop. So it's not the devices that are an issue, clearly. And also, if the Fire Stick is still working, then clearly the internet is working. So yeah, had an absolute palaver this morning, proper mental breakdown, because I'm delivering training today at 11 o'clock. And I was like, if I can't get on the internet, I can't deliver training. That's going to be a problem. So thankfully hopefully my iPad holds out on its hotspot and we can get through this and my training later on. So before I dive straight into the news headlines, I wanted to talk about a video that I saw on TikTok this morning. It popped up on my For You section, and it was from a plumber. And this plumber was sat in his van, and he was trying to talk through a conversation he'd just had with a local letting agent. Now, the conversation that he'd had was the letting agent had contacted him and said, like, we'd love you to do all of our work. You know, when can you come on board, yada, yada, yada. And then the agent went on to say, oh, by the way, we charge 20% on top of your invoices. Plumber was like, yeah, that's not a problem. Most agents do that, so that's not weird. And the agent then went on to say, but you add the 20% onto your invoice, and then, but we'll only pay you what your invoice was, and then we'll keep the 20% difference. And the plumber was like, how does that work from his perspective? So he's telling HMRC that he's submitted an invoice for 120 quid, but the agent's only paying 100 quid of it. So basically, for every invoice that this plumber is going to submit to the agency, he loses 20%. And the agent was just like, yeah, that's how it works. The agent couldn't get their head around the fact that the way that the commissions work is the plumber submits his invoice for 100 quid. It's the agent's uplift fee. It's not the plumber's. It's not the trade's uplift. It's the agent's uplift fee. So the agent should then create their own invoice, which has the plumber's invoice, £100, then their uplift of 20%, and the full total being £120. Landlord pays the agent the full amount. The agent then pays the plumber his £100 invoice, and everyone's square. Agent gets to keep that 20 quid. But the agent wasn't having none of it. No, that's not how it works. You have to put the uplift on there for us. Well, the poor plumber's like shit out of luck then, isn't he? And HMRC are going to be investigating him like no one's business. How does your agency work? Or are you a landlord that works with an agency where they've got the uplift on their trade invoices? So basically like an arranging the works fee or something. I don't know how they phrase it these days. But also it's important, it must be in the terms of business, and it must be displayed on their website and everywhere else that they have their fees, like in their office. So if it's not transparent, they're actually breaching legislation. So it'd be interesting to see how anybody else is working as an agency, or landlords, or even trades, how you work with that situation. Dave, normal practice, agents do this. He then issues a credit note, intro fees. Yeah, but why should he? Why should he have to do all the paperwork if it's the agent's fee? It's not for the trade to pay the agent's fee. That's for the landlord. That's a landlord fee. It's not a trade fee. So I just don't understand why the agent is basically doing nothing. The trade does all the extra paperwork, but they're the one that loses out on 20%. I don't see the logic in that. Dave, as agents are not legally allowed to charge the landlord. Yeah, of course they are. They're absolutely legally allowed to charge the landlord. It just has to be transparent in their fees on their website, in their terms of business, on the fees on their office wall. Absolutely, agents can charge that for sure, and most do. It's very, very common. I'm just interested to know why this agent believes that they don't have to do any work at all, keep their hands clean, and the poor plumber's now got to sit and do an extra 4 hours worth of paperwork for the agent and get nothing for it. You are allowed to top up on invoices, Dave. You are, absolutely. It's perfectly acceptable. I don't know well, I do. I actually know about 3 agents that don't, but it's extremely common. And as long as they're transparent, there's no issue on that at all. Anyway, we could argue the toss of this all day long, but let's not. Let's move on to the news headlines, and then we can carry on discussing this one later, because I think I might even do a separate video on it, actually, because I see it's going to create quite a lot of comments, debate, which is always really, really good. It's nice to get those debates. I was a flooring contractor and did the same. Well-known agents as well. Yeah, well, sometimes the bigger ones are the biggest problems, to be honest with you, Dave. I found the bigger the agency, the bigger the problems, because the people on the front lines don't give a shit because they think the legal department in head office is going to help them out. 9 times out of 10 it doesn't, because the legal department don't actually know what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. Anyway, to the news headlines for today. So I'm going to start with property industry A. It still makes me think of Ali G every time I do that. I trust you. Dave, don't trust me. Gordon, but I don't trust myself. Honestly. Yeah. Most of the days I wake up, I don't even know my own name. So probably best not to trust me. But it is in legislation. I'm actually going to do a video on it, Dave. I am. I'm going to put that on my to-do, because if it don't go on a list, it ain't going to happen. Trade uplift. I'm going to do a video on it, and I'm going to find the bit of legislation that says it has to be transparent, and then we'll move that on. Anyway, so property industry eye. So London housing shortage at worst level since the Second World War. Wow, that's a very dramatic headline for the morning. The sun is shining directly on my laptop, can't see a bloody thing. So the article goes on to say, despite government commitments to promise house building, new analysis from the Centre for Policy Study suggests there has been limited progress towards meeting housing targets. No shit, Sherlock. Absolutely, we know they're not building. Angela Rayner talked a lot about building, and Steve Reed, the new housing minister's build, baby, build, but I ain't building nothing. So, housing policy featured predominantly in Parliament in 2025, with planning reform mentioned 520 times. A record high. That's a bit like me on a night out, how many times I mention wine. Wine? Should we have some more wine? Should we have some wine? Let's have some wine. However, construction data shows a contrasting trend. In 24-25, every region in England recorded fewer housing starts than the previous financial year. According to new data published by the Centre for Policy Studies, the decline was most pronounced in London, where just 4,170 new homes began construction. Now, it's not saying any of those were actually completed, it's just saying they were started. 72% decrease compared to the previous year. I mean, that's shocking. We're not building anything, baby, are we? We're not building. London has completed more than 10,000 homes annually, year on year, since 1946. However, consultancy Mollier forecasts that completions will fall to around 4,550 homes per year for both 26, 27 and 28, based on current level of housing stats. The policy study says that this would represent the lowest level of house building in the capital more than 80 years. I mean, what is the problem? Surely directly after World War II, we were at our worst ability to build. Most of what we had been bombed out. Most of the men, and I know that's a sexist comment, but that's how it was back then. Most of the men that would have been the builders had been at war, are now traumatised or had been killed. So our male population had decreased horrendously. That's when they invented prefab. That's when prefab happened, straight after the Second World War, so that you could literally just, poof, there's a home. Poof, there's a home. You didn't need to have foundations and building it, and it just, poof, there's a home. You could put the prefabs up almost overnight. Yet now we're in a generation and a genre where everything is instant. You know, it's so easy to get bricks and mortar and all the materials you need, the trades, everything is there for you. Yet we're struggling the hardest to build the damn houses. It just baffles me. It really does. Too many career politicians and nobody actually knowing how to do the fucking job. So the article goes on to say, the government has stood by the damaging Second World War staircase rule and awarded the head of building safety regulator with a peerage, despite the body actively preventing construction from taking place. But that's a complete contradiction of itself, is it not? Changes to the National Planning Policy Framework were welcomed by every chance the government will fold to pressure from environmental charities. Well, yeah, absolutely. They're more worried about the minority than they are about the majority, and they've showed that with the Renters' Rights Act. That bill is based purely on some very loud minorities than it has been on the general voice of the majority. Basically, it goes on, they have failed to deliver in 2025, but they must hope 2026 improves. Well, how? If they want to build 1.5 million homes during their parliamentary session, which obviously is 5 years, they've had a year already in power, and that means they should be building 300,000 homes a year, completing 300,000 homes a year. In their first year, they've actually only completed 140,000. That's all they've completed. So that's not very good, is it? That's nowhere near target. They're already off target by nearly 50%, so, or over 50%. Nonsense. Anyway, what's your thoughts on the house building situation and the government? Do you feel they are sort of their own worst enemy? You know, they're all talk, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of action. I mean, we talked earlier last week earlier this week about the Mayor of London launching his own property portal. And when we actually looked at it, there was no properties on there. They were all bizarre test listings. So how do we feel about the government and we actually being in a worse building perspective than we were directly after the Second World War? I mean, that says a lot, doesn't it, really? But you can't blame Labour specifically, because ultimately there have been governments since the Second World War that also haven't really done what they should have done. They haven't worked for the people. And I think politicians need to start remembering that their job is to basically represent us in Parliament. Their job is for the people. This and previous governments seem to be very much self-serving. You know, they are career politicians and they're only interested in their own exit strategy. They couldn't give a shit, really, whether we are in poverty. Rachel Reeves' idea of lifting the 2-child benefit cap was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We're trying to save money. We're trying to find money. So let's open the bag and just let the money fall out to anyone who's got more than 2 children. I don't get that. Jimmy, if anybody at their job did this as bad as they did, they'd simply be sacked. You're absolutely right. And this is the only job where you are employed with 0 experience, 0 knowledge, and probably 0 expectation of actually doing a good job. It just baffles me. If there was any other job, like you say, where you walked in and went, yeah, I did 10 years at HSBC, no proof, it's all BS, and you get a job in charge of the entire country's money. I mean, come on. I don't think there's ever been a minister in power that has actually been in the industry that he is then the minister for, or she, the minister for. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I do think Nigel Farage has got a better plan. Plans are all fine, well and good on paper. That he's actually going to put people into senior minister roles, like the Treasurer, like the Housing Minister, you know, all of those senior roles, from people who have actually worked in the industry. So you don't have to be a career politician to actually get into politics. You can go in at these higher levels because you've got the experience. But there's a process you have to go through, like sworn in and stuff. So that's what Nigel Farage's idea is. And to be fair, I think that's probably the best way forward. I mean, I always said when Brexit was happening, I know I've gone off the topic of property, we'll come back onto it in a moment, don't worry. I think when it came to Brexit, it would have made more sense for me if they'd have got heads of businesses such as Alan Sugar and all of those that have been in business their entire lives, negotiating at those upper echelon levels to actually negotiate Brexit, rather than Boris, bless his heart, going in bimbling on about Peppa Pig and some other nonsense. But I think we would have got a better deal if we'd have actually put a businessman or businesswoman in there to negotiate, rather than some career politician who just has no concept of the real world for the rest of us. But anyway, I digress. Off I go on a tangent. Me and my soapbox. So let's move on to the Metro now. So the Metro have their headline, which is... Oh, I've hid the headline. City once nicknamed Satan's Layby, now crowned one of UK's coolest postcodes. It's cool, right? It's cool. The UK's coolest postcodes have been crowned, but there's surprising pick among the 2026 pack. Milton Keynes, famously dubbed Satan's Layby by Bill Bailey, has made the Times annual list of the 11 most happening UK postcodes. I live about 40 minutes from Milton Keynes. I don't know if it's happening. I don't know. Does anyone else live in Milton Keynes? Do you think it's happening? The concrete jungle has undergone quite the revamp since it was built on the country's first new towns in 1967. It wasn't the first, though. I think Harlow was actually the first, or was it Letchworth? Anyone know which was the first, Letchworth or Harlow? Because I know it wasn't Milton Keynes, that wasn't the first, but it was one of the new ones. Through its soulless grey buildings and American-style grid pattern are still the city's most famous features, including those cows on roundabouts. The Buckinghamshire hub now has a fantastic art scene, thriving coffee culture, according to research. I do like Milton Keynes, to be honest with you. There's a lot going on in there, but I don't like the shopping centre. Too many people. It's very peoply. Food scene is good though. Lots of fantastic restaurants in Milton Keynes. And you've got the snow centre. You can go skiing. I don't go skiing. I sit and I just drink hot chocolate and watch everybody else ski. A lady called Sophie, who is a content creator, born and bred in Milton Keynes, goes on to say, my parents were born in Milton Keynes in the 60s and my grandparents were London overspill, moving to the area in the early 50s. My great-grandfather opened a shop in Bletchley High Street that became Neil's Toys and is part of the fabric of MK's history. That's quite nice. If you've got somewhere the family have been all their life and you've got that history, I think that's really nice. She grew up 10 minutes from the city centre and says her experience was predominantly much more like most millennials in the area. Nothing that wasn't amazing and often struggled to find things to do. Really? Anybody born in the 70s like me, growing up in the 80s, there wasn't a lot to do. You made your own fun, didn't you? I used to live in Essex and me and my friends, we would go into Epping Forest for the day. My parents weren't worried about serial killers or paedophiles. I mean, what self-respecting paedophile was going to wait in the forest for us lot to turn up? We were terrifying. Honestly, we were terrifying. Anyway, I thought that was quite interesting. Milton Keynes is cool again now, apparently. Yeah, fab. So let's move on to Letting Agent Today. I need tea. Now, on a more serious note now. So in Letting Agent Today, Renters' Rights Act may trigger distorted property sales. An agency chief says the Renters' Rights Act may trigger some rental property sales early this year. And he fears this could be a distorted price, which could in turn confuse a market recovery. However, John Bynes, founder of London agency Anderson Rose, says he believes any such sell-off will be short-lived. I think he's right. I think anybody selling now because of the Renters' Rights Act will do it all quickly before May, and then I think that'll be it. Landlords that are staying. They'll just buckle up, put crash helmets on and all that. In a preview of the market for 2026, he says, the one main concern is the Renters' Rights Act due to come in law in May. There might be a number of landlords who try and sell in the first quarter of the year. This will increase supply, potentially at distorted prices, which could confuse and affect the future market. However, with so few forced landlord sales, we expect that to be short-lived. We would agree that there is little reason to sell now if you are a landlord with a good tenant, unless you are one of the landlords who bought in the 90s and were looking to exit anyway because that was less incentivised and you are now chasing your retirement investment. Fair point, really. And I've always said that. I genuinely believe anybody that is looking to exit now is probably somebody that would have exited in the next 5 years anyway, and is simply just bringing that forward because it's a perfect storm for landlords. You've got making tax digital, you've got the new EPC regulations, you've got the Renters' Rights Act. For landlords that are self-managing, not on a professional level, and by that I mean it's not their full-time job, then yeah, absolutely, if they were going to exit in the next 5 years, it probably makes sense to do it now. Because, you know, what's the next 5 years going to bring? Nothing but red tape and compliance headaches. So yeah, I get that. I think he's spot on. And yeah, I think it probably will affect market values for a little while, but only for a short while. Will that then have a knock-on effect to mortgages and mortgage valuations and remortgaging? I wonder if that will have a knock-on effect. That might be an interest. Any mortgage advisors out there know or have an opinion on that? That would be really helpful. And then finally, I'm going to move to LandlordZone today. Letting agent banned for persistent failure to license homes. Wasn't Rachel Reeves' agent, was it? Liverpool-based Roach Estates and Property Management Limited has been banned from letting properties as well as letting agency work and property management work for 1 year. A first-tier tribunal hearing was held in October and the firm was convicted of failing to comply with the improvement notice relating to a property in Liverpool and fined £3,000. A month later, it was convicted for failing to licence 2 flats in Bootle and fined £10,000. Liverpool City Council said the firm's offences were widespread and persistent. Clearly, they weren't quick learners. In 2019, it was fined for 29 offences of failure to licence properties in a selective licensing area, which were all unconnected houses in different streets. So not even like the same landlord and they just ballsed up on one deal. Wow. An unchallenged statement from the landlord of the flats in Daniel House reported that the firm had charged her £775 for attaining a licence under the selective licence scheme, but hadn't actually applied for it. The judge said this indicates a level of This indicates a level of intentionality on the part of the respondent, the agent. It did not appear that the application for the licence had merely been overlooked, but simply not applied for at all. Despite the 2019 convictions, the entry on the database of rogue landlords and property agents, further offences were committed. All other attempts to convince the firm to comply with statutory obligations had failed, and a banning order was necessary as the last resort from the council. The tribunal accepted the seriousness of the offences and noted that Roach Estates director, although plainly aware of the hearing, had chosen not to attend or take part in the proceedings. The authority had argued for 3-year ban, but the judge imposed a ban of 1 year. He explained this is intended to reflect the fact that no actual harm to tenants appeared to have been caused by the respondents' offences, and nevertheless it sent a deterrent message to other property managers. Okay, so that judge's comment to me is too one-sided. So it has no direct harm to the tenants. Or what about the direct harm to the landlords whose property wasn't licensed? Have the council gone on to fine them, rent repayment orders and things like that? That's harm, is it not? So have the council basically turned around and gone, yeah, absolutely, we see it was the agent that didn't do what they should have done. sorry, we won't go after the landlord. I'd like to know more about that story, if I'm honest. But I just think there is a whole reason to have a regulation of letting agents. And I think situations like this demonstrate why nobody trusts agents. You know, nobody trusts agents because of situations like this. It's absolutely ridiculous. So if you've got any comments or if you've got any questions regarding today's news articles and my earlier little soapbox that I got on with Dave, do like, wherever the like thing is, do like and follow me, because it helps my algorithms. And the more algorithmy thingies I get, the more people get to see these videos, my other videos that I do on specific topics and helping. We want to improve the industry, and I want to be able to do that one conversation at a time. So please do like, follow, and any of those little diamondy things that people keep sending. Apparently TikTok like that, makes TikTok happy. Still don't know what they do. I didn't actually get round to looking that up, which I said I was going to. So with my internet issues currently put to bed, and hopefully my training session earlier doesn't dip out in any way, shape or form, we should be good to go. Oh, Dave, you have a question. Can you ask a question on a guarantor I messed up on? You can. Do you want to do it here on the live, or do you want to send me a DM and then we can talk privately about that? I'm more than happy to do it on a DM, Dave, if that's going to be easier for you. Just let me thumbs up for a DM, or if you want to do it here on the live. I'm either or, really, to be fair. Don't mind. DM me, Dave, and we'll have a chat about it. So thank you very much for joining me this morning. There will not be a live tomorrow morning. I am out and about delivering training, so I'm travelling early in the morning. But I will be back here 9 a.m. Friday morning for the rest of the property news. So no news tomorrow, but I'm back on Friday. Thank you so much, everybody, for following me, for liking me, for joining me all of these mornings, and for all of your likes and follows. Much appreciated. And Dave, you and I will speak later. Take